Hello, and welcome to the latest version. I'm your host, Betsy Bush. I'm starting out this second series of the latest version by telling you a bit about myself, why I think the topic of reinvention is so important in midlife, and about my return to the audio space with podcasting after decades away from the broadcast studio. It's a story about early passions, trips and stumbles, exploration, and also a sense of coming home. It's also about things that affect everybody. Longevity, for one. It's about a search for meaning and joy, a sense of accomplishment, and I think at midlife especially, the satisfaction of knowing that you tried, that you put at least one of those what-ifs to rest. So let's take a trip in the time machine back to April 1985.
That's when I decided to flee.
Dr. Loser was a leading member of the East German Communist Party, the party secretary and a professor of philosophy at East Berlin's Humboldt University, positions of considerable political influence. But last September, Franz Loser left East Germany with only the belongings he could fit in a suitcase. He was later granted political asylum in the U.S. I spoke to Dr. Loser in Cologne to publish his latest book, and he told me of the frustrations of living in the democracy that has slid into dictatorship.
In East Germany,
That's my 24-year-old self co-anchoring a half-hour radio magazine program called Across the Atlantic, produced by the German public radio broadcast service Deutsche Welle in Cologne, West Germany, which aired on U.S. public radio stations. I say West Germany, you don't hear that anymore, because in 1985, Germany was still divided and the Iron Curtain kept East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary behind a fortified border. My few forays into communist Poland and East Germany, and even the Soviet Union back then, make for some pretty interesting stories, but I'll save those for another time. This is my last report from across the Atlantic.
This is a very special Across the Atlantic for us here in Cologne, and for me it's the last program with my co-host Betsy Hills. Betsy's returning to the States soon after almost 2 years with us here at Deutsche Welle. And before she left, she had a very unique assignment, a very special project she wanted to complete. Betsy?
Thanks, Willie. Like a lot of Americans, I had always wondered if I could find my family roots here in Germany. In preparing for my search, I was very lucky to have a lot of family information already at hand. The German ancestor I wanted to track down was named Johann Nicholas Dietrich. He was born in 1727 in the village of Riesweiler, in an area south of the Mosel River and west of the Rhine called the Hunsrück. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, Dietrich, immigrated to America and settled in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. But the village of Riesweiler is still on the map.
My 2 years at Deutsche Welle were the high point of my broadcasting career. I got there the way I fell into a lot of opportunities at a young age. I was volunteering as a reporter at the public radio station in Cincinnati, which, by the way, was where my now husband was a student, when I ran into a German gentleman from Deutsche Welle looking for a co-anchor for his new program Across the Atlantic. It was literally that easy. I had just come back from a summer program in Germany. I spoke some of the language. The problem with great jobs falling into your lap like that, I've since found, is that you probably haven't done the preparation for the job, and if you're honest, you probably don't deserve it. I was so young, 23, good enough, but insecure, and my insecurity kept me from learning as much as I could have. My insecurity kept me from admitting that there were places where I needed to shore up my weaknesses. And I never really got that back. When I left Germany to get married and move to New York, there were no radio jobs for me. I was still too young and inexperienced to work in the #1 market in the country. And that was the end of my broadcasting career. I went on to find the field of nonprofit fundraising and development to be a place where I could put my writing skills to work. And that was that. Marriage, kids, house, you know the deal. In episode 3 of the first series of the latest version, I talked to Lucy Philpott, the English teacher, who was talking about working on her first novel. She describes returning to her childhood love of storytelling and returning to the story writing she loved as a girl as her inspiration and motivation she needed to get started on her novel. I love the podcasting world and the vast variety of audio productions out there. Not just what I do here at the latest version, the conversations with really interesting people who have something really interesting to say, but also the other podcasts with the reportage and ambient sound, on-location interviews, all enhanced by sound design. It's storytelling on a grand scale, and it all takes place between the 2 ears of the listener. It's magic. Maybe it started when I was a kid and we had a lot of story records at home, most especially Winnie the Pooh, wonderfully read by English actor Maurice Evans. There was Danny Kaye, the actor and comedian who recorded records for kids with songs and funny bits that had me rolling on the floor. Then as a teen, I discovered public radio, which was just getting started in the 70s. Not just national public radio and All Things Considered, but the crazy quilt of programming you'd find on college radio or public access radio. I remember tuning in to an episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe and being transfixed by the worlds, the planets, the alien characters being conjured up through dialogue and sound. So much more satisfying than anything the movies could produce. And you know why? Because you're asking the listener to co-produce the story with you. What I am imagining in my head is different from what you're imagining in your head. And nothing, if you listen to ghost stories on podcasts, and I am a big fan of Spooked, you cannot imagine anything scarier than what you can imagine. No movie or television show can be scarier than what you can imagine in your head. That Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe episode, I heard it once. I've never heard it again. I haven't even heard any other episodes, but it so impressed me and it stuck with me all through the years. I knew that was something I wanted to do. At New York University, I was in the undergraduate film and TV department. My guest on my second episode, Leela Goldstein, was my college roommate. She was a film major. I was TV, but oriented myself towards radio. And there I found myself at WNYU. My big project was creating a live radio drama program. And honestly, everyone kind of laughed. It's like, radio drama, that's something they did in the 30s. You know, hey, what are you doing with that gun in your hand? That kind of thing. They didn't seem to get the same thing that I knew could happen. The idea was to do live radio drama because it would be very high stakes and therefore kind of exciting. But also fast. Once you do it, it goes out over the air, it's done, there's no obsessing over details and post-production, and it was moderately successful. The advantage to radio, as I explained to my film major friends, was that it was cheap and fast. You could go out with story ideas, write dialogue, and see if it worked. Why not? Unfortunately, not many of my friends took me up on the offer. But I was onto something. And I'll tell you, just this past February, the New York Times Arts and Leisure section did a huge multi-page report on podcasting. And one of the people it talked to was Lamorne Morris, who, with Kyle Chevron, are the creators of the buddy action comedy podcast Unwanted. It partly pays homage to Beverly Hills Cop. I'm going to read directly from this article here because it's just amazing. So according to Lamorne Morris, podcasts offer a rare opportunity to test a new idea quickly and cheaply. When you're a creative person, you need an outlet, Morris said. You can't always say, let's go and make a $50 million movie, but you can sit down, record, and say your idea out loud. Unwanted, his show, Morris said, could very well be a film or television project. The story, he said, was just one of millions of ideas he and Kyle Chevron, his co-creator and writing partner, have bandied about, and podcasting allowed it to become a reality. It's a proof of concept, Morris said, to say to the industry, this works, this is fun, this is something that can be done. This is something I was saying 40 years ago about radio. If only they'd listened to me. College radio was fun. One of my colleagues at the station was Martha Quinn, one of the original MTV VJs. And yes, she's always been just as nice in person as she was on MTV. One of my low moments, and everybody has one of these, I think, was being up with a baby at 3 a.m. sometime in the 90s and turning on the TV and seeing Martha Quinn with Davy Jones from the Monkees doing some kind of TV retrospective. Oh, I thought, Martha Quinn got to meet Davy Jones. Oh, it was one of those what-if moments that I'm sure many of you have had. I'm also going to admit that I'm haunted by a call I never made to a contact I got, a producer of audiobooks, soon after I returned to New York from Germany. To have gotten into audiobooks, then called books on tape, on the ground floor would have been huge. That still makes me wonder, what if? But can there be anything more destructive than going back and wondering, what if? Coulda, shoulda, woulda. All those things that can't be resolved today at any time. I used to think that this question, what if, of wondering what your life would have been like if you'd made different choices, was one that was mostly confined to women. Women traditionally have set aside careers for raising kids and tending home fires, only to wonder, what if? What could I have done if I'd made different choices? So it was interesting to read an article in the New Yorker by Joshua Rothman that this idea of the unled life has long been a male preoccupation as well. Remember the Robert Frost poem from high school English class? Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. No doubt some of us go down a road and at some point ask ourselves, if it's too late to get back on that other road, we have to choose a road. And as we do, our options narrow and disappear. Remember when you were a kid in maybe kindergarten and the teacher asks everybody what they want to be, and there's always some kid who says, I want to be an astronaut? And it seems so wonderful at that age because your options are completely open. And to be an astronaut is a wonderful thing, but that's a very narrow and constricted path. And I don't think a theater arts major could become an astronaut all of a sudden. I don't think. If you have a desk job, maybe you sometimes wonder, what if I had kept doing the theater thing, the dancing thing, the singing thing, the artist thing, and wonder what that life, if you could have been successful at that life. But at the same time, the artists out there might be thinking, gee, I wish I had more stability, or I wish I had more financial stability or predictability in my life. We never really know where things go. On this second series of the latest version, I'll be talking to two women who can tell us a bit about what that's like. I'll be talking to Betsy Stewart, who went from a successful opera career to being a fundraising consultant for nonprofit organizations. What was that like to make that switch? And why exactly did she make the switch? And then there's painter Jill Krutik, who left her career as a financial analyst to pursue painting full-time. And now her work is exhibited and collected. There's no single right answer, only the answer that's right for you. Two books you might want to check out. The first is The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. This is a very popular book that's been out there for at least 25 years. It's something of a workbook where you go through exercises week by week to unlock your creativity or rediscover your creativity. There's also an interesting book that I've just become acquainted with called The Renaissance Soul by Margaret Lobenstein. There's information on these books on the website, the latest version podcast.com. Lobenstein's book really spoke to me because I often feel like I'm always finding new things that interest me. Gardening, native plants, urban ecology, architecture. I went back to college at 56 and got a second undergraduate degree majoring in architecture, but the core curriculum absolutely fed my soul. So maybe what I am is a Renaissance soul. Lobenstein has an interesting exercise for those of us who think, I'm too old to start something new. What's the point? I'm blank years old, yada, yada, yada. So here is an exercise that I found very interesting. So here it is. Write down your age. I'm 60, a nice round number. Then write down what age you expect to live to. Okay, that's a little weird because none of us know what's in store. But okay, so I put down 90 because my parents lived into their 90s. Then subtract 60 from 90, and you get 30. Okay, so I have, God willing, 30 years ahead of me. But then Lobenstein does something interesting. Subtract the sum you got, for me 30, from your current age. That puts me at 30. 30 minus 60 minus 30 is 30. Okay. So in short, I have as many years ahead of me now at 60 as I did when I was 30 up to this moment. I find that mind-blowing. If I were 30 to 60, a lot happened in those years. Potentially, as much could happen now until I reach 90, God willing. So I'll give you my take on what and why these can be very productive years, or very satisfying years. Think of all the things you probably don't have to worry about now. And I saw this among my undergraduate classmates when I was at Columbia. You probably don't have to worry about what you're going to do on Saturday night. Or does so-and-so like me? Or what is my life going to be like? Am I going to be married, kids, career? Where am I going to live and with whom? All those questions that occupy most college students have been settled for you. What I loved about going back to college was being able to appreciate and delve into the course material and having time to read the assignments and the books and not being obsessed with the grade, but really getting into what the course was about. And as an older student, I brought context from my life and what I knew of history to the lectures and the readings. It was far more meaningful. It's also true I could not have done that coursework at 18. The skills I acquired over the years helped me to get through that really tough coursework. And I have to say, those kids at Columbia are really smart. The point is, there's no reason to stop being interested in the world around you or to think that you can't try new things. What is your latest version? What's your latest version going to be? That's the biggest question to ask yourself right now. I end every episode asking my guest what 3 pieces of advice she has to share. So I will share advice that I got from season 1. Laura Lavi, my first guest, said, "Be intentional. There's room for you in whatever field you choose, but expect to work at it. Be intentional." From Leela Goldstein, the collage artist, "Don't be afraid to fail. Just keep trying." I would say, expect to fail sometimes because failure is where we learn. If you're always successful, you're not really learning. And that was a lesson I realize now I learned as a very young person who went to Germany at 23 with hardly any experience under my belt. I was afraid to fail, and I think by being afraid, I did not learn as much as I could have. And finally, from Lucy Philpott, the English teacher and writer, find that thing that gave you joy as a kid. What is your latest version going to be? I'm Betsy Bush.